They say the past is in the past, but why does it still linger? Mistakes, broken promises, unfulfilled potential. What if you could go back? What would you change? Would you repeat the same mistakes, or would you be a better person? What if you could reset?
What's up, Catalyst? We're so glad that you guys are here tonight. If this is your first time here, we want to welcome you, and we hope that you'll find a leader or your campus student minister and introduce yourself. We'd love to meet you in the after party. My name is Michael Hinton, and I am the student outreach minister at the Northwest campus. And last week, we kicked off our series called Reset. Now, in this series, we're looking at what a reset in our faith and in our life could do for us. One thing that I've come to find out about you and me is that no one can wreck our lives quite like we can. Am I right? We seem to have a unique ability to mess things up and to mess them up in a hurry. Regardless of the situation, we find ways to wreck things, from thinking the wrong things to saying the wrong things and even doing the wrong things. We can quickly find ourselves on the wrong end of our choices if we're not careful. Those wrong choices, while being in the past, will always find a way to keep up with us, consistently reminding us of our failures and holding us hostage from all the beautiful ways that God desires to use us. Now, before I go on to what I'm about to say next, I want to give you a little disclaimer, students. You know how from time to time you think to yourself, my parents really don't know at all what they're doing when it comes to parenting me? Well, let me just tell you, you would be right, partially. There are times when we're just kind of making it up as we go, especially if you're the firstborn. For the most part, parents get it right, but there are moments where we get it wrong as well. Here's what I mean. A few years ago, our family took a trip to a store where they sell kids' items. It was my kids' favorite place to go. Now, on this one particular trip to this kids' fantasy world, my wife had taken our oldest daughter, Kira, into the store with her to purchase some items. While shopping, Kira showed my wife a book that she really wanted to buy. And my wife said, well, we're not going to buy that, and for you to return it back to where you found it. A few moments later, my wife and Kira were returning to the car, and my wife was upset about something. I had no idea what it was. She proceeded to tell me, you need to have a talk with your daughter, right? So then my wife tells me that Kira had stolen the book and it was hiding in her jacket. Sure enough, when I asked Kira about it, she opened her jacket and out fell the book. Now, I immediately got out of the car and I take Kira inside the store to return the book, and I'm hoping to scare the living daylights out of her for doing such a thing. While walking back to the store, I'm telling her that the police are going to take her away and they're going to put her in jail, and she won't be able to see mommy and daddy or her little sister for a very long time. I'm trying to scare her. And we get into the store, and as soon as we get into the store, I announce to the entire store, my daughter has stolen a book. At this point, my daughter is crying uncontrollably, and by all accounts, she's scared to death of what could happen next. Now, from that point on, anytime we went to the store, before we left the store, I would basically do like a pat down of Kira to make sure she hadn't stolen anything. This went on for about a few months until one day my wife confronted me about it. She said to me, Michael, you've got to stop letting Kira's past mistake define what you think of her now. Ouch. Every time I think of that story, I'm stung by the truth my wife said to me. You see, because it became easy for me to see my daughter as a kid who steals because, well, she'd stolen something. It was hard to look past that incident and see anything else in those moments. In my mind, my daughter had made a mistake that I couldn't look past. She had gone too far for me to trust her ever again. I had essentially let her past define who she was. And I'm not afraid to admit it to you guys. I was wrong. Our past isn't the one thing that determines who we will become, nor should it be the factor that tells us who we are. That's the beauty of a reset. It's not a start over. It's not a do-over. It's a fresh new beginning. You see, a reset deals with our sin. A reset points us to Jesus. And a reset frees us to live the life God designed for us. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk to you about why a reset can be the catalyst to set you free from your past. If you have a Bible or a phone with a Bible app, please go to John 8. And let me encourage you that if you don't have a Bible, I'd love for you to download the YouVersion Bible app on your phone. It's a great way to help you start reading the Bible. So John chapter 8, starting verse 1, it says, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early next morning, he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says we should stone her. What do you say? So they bring before the crowd and Jesus this woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. Now, the word adultery on the surface simply means having a physical relationship with someone of the opposite sex outside the relationship of marriage. So this woman was being accused of having a physical relationship with a man who wasn't her husband. In this moment, two people have come face to face with a mistake, or more accurately, sin, and they have to deal with the repercussions of it. For this woman, she will have to deal with the shame of being caught and labeled as such. She will have to deal with the internal guilt that is sure to be with her for the rest of her life. And for Jesus, he will have to deal with how to treat this woman. Now, the saying can be said true of us in that we just can't let sin linger or fester like an unhealed sore. Now, this reality leads us to our first can't miss thought. And that is, in order to experience freedom from our past, we must be willing to deal with the sins of our past. So last week, Eric, our North Campus student minister, did a phenomenal job explaining that when it comes to our past mistakes, we first hide and then we blame, right? We simply hide. And in the midst of our hiding, we blame everyone and everything except ourselves. But here's the truth about sin. We can't hide and blame sin away, which means our sins continue to stay around us and fester and grow and return worse than before. But in order to experience the freedom, we can't leave our sin unchecked, because sin left unchecked is dangerous. And I want you guys to know that sin will take you further than you want to go. It'll keep you longer than you want to stay, and it'll cost you more than you want to pay. Here's what I mean. Sin will take you further than you want to go. You think, you'll just do this one little thing, like a little white lie, or a little bit more with the opposite sex, or you'll look at that website once, or you ignore your parents this one little thing. But those little things turn into just a little bit more of a thing, and then those things turn into a little bit more of a thing, and it keeps growing, and before you know it, that little thing has now turned into a bigger thing. And you look up at where you started, and you wonder, how in the world did it get this far? Sin will also keep you longer than you want to stay. When you end up going further than you wanted to go, you'll end up in that sin longer than you anticipated. You think it's only for a short time that you'll snap out of it. It'll be no problem. But time goes by and you keep finding that certain sins keep creeping up in your life. No matter how hard you try, you keep finding yourself in the midst of that sin's dwelling place. And so because of this, sin will always cost you more than you want to pay. Sin is not free. It comes with a price that isn't so cheap. And if we let sin fester and linger, it will end up costing us our integrity, our friends, our family, and what we're talking about here tonight, our future. You'll always owe something to sin if you don't deal with it now. And that's where we find this woman. In the midst of her sin, where it's taken her too far, kept her too long, and cost her too much. And just like her, we've got to deal with our past sin. We've got to put it in a place and learn from it, and then move on. In order to experience the kind of freedom that God gives us from our past, We have to give our past sins over to God and move forward. Let me put this in a tangible way for you by asking a question. Do you drive a car forward by looking through the rearview mirror or looking through the front windshield? Now, of course, you look through the front windshield. For those of you who can drive and you're looking through the rearview mirror to drive forward, more power to you. Don't drive when I'm driving, okay? But the way we deal with our past mistakes is by giving it to God and looking forward to all the ways that God will nullify them in our present and our future. So that's why what happens next in the story is super important. Look with me at verse 7. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." So they're pressuring Jesus for an answer. How should we deal with this woman's sin, Jesus? The law demands that we kill her. I don't know why I'm speaking in that crazy voice, but I am. What do you think we should do? All the while, Jesus is like ignoring them. But after enough of demanding, Jesus finally answers them, but not in the way that he thought he would. He basically says, okay, kill her, but let the one who has never committed a sin, never made a mistake, never done anything wrong, let that be the one to initiate the killing. Do you see what he did there? He completely caught them off guard with his response to their question. They wanted to kill this woman and catch Jesus with a slip of the tongue, and Jesus flipped it on them. Now, if I'm this woman, I'm like, oh, hold on, Jesus, wait a second. I thought we were like friends. I thought we were like cool. You were a friend of sinners, and you just left me out to dry. They about to kill me, Jesus. From the outside, it looks like a savage move on the part of Jesus. But if we look a little bit closer, we'll see something far more gracious and beautiful. This reality will lead us to our second can't miss thought. And that is, in order to deal with the sins of our past, we must be willing to let Jesus be an advocate for our past. Here's what I mean. Only Jesus and not the teachers or the Pharisees had the right to kill her. Jesus was the only one standing among the crowd that had not sinned, made a mistake, or done anything remotely bad. Jesus was the only one who could have labeled her a sinner and punished her accordingly. Instead, Jesus went to bat for this woman. He stood up to her accusers and dared them to throw a stone, at least pick one up. Jesus stood in the gap for this woman because he believed that she was more than her mistakes, that she was more than the label she had earned through her sin, and that she was more than her past. Jesus wants to stand in the gap for you and me as well. When our past comes rearing its ugly head back in your life, Jesus wants to stand and advocate for you that he's dealt with your past. When the enemy tries to remind you of all the bad things you've done, Jesus wants to stand and advocate for you that you are no longer the person you were before him. When the residual effect of past mistakes find their way back to you, Jesus wants to stand and advocate for you that his death on the cross takes away that eternal consequence of separation from him. However, that is not all he wants to do for you, with you, and through you. Jesus doesn't just want to be an advocacy for you. He also wants to free you entirely and wholeheartedly from your past so that you can look forward to the life he designed for you. And you don't have to look any further than his response to the woman as evident that he wants this for you and me. Check out verse 9. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning from the oldest, until Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." This verse always tugs at my heart. Every time I read it, I hear it or see it, I picture Jesus meeting my stare with his eyes and speaking in a comforting yet commanding voice. "Michael, where are your accusers? They didn't condemn you? Well, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Man, there's so much packed in that statement alone. But I want you to focus on the last reality of our can't miss thoughts. That in order for Jesus to be an advocacy of our past, we must be willing to let Jesus forgive our past and set us free from our past. See, Jesus was the only one who could have stoned or killed this woman, and yet he chose not to. Instead, he decided that he would advocate for her and stand in the gap for her against her accusers. Then he did something that completely changed the course of this woman's life. He forgave her past. He forgave her present, and he forgave her future sins, all in one beautiful, powerful statement. He asked her if her accusers were left to condemn her, and they were not. They couldn't. They had all sinned and made mistakes. The only one who could chose not to. So then Jesus told her, I am not going to condemn you. I'm going to forgive you of everything past, present, and future. Go and live the life I designed for you. He forgave her, and then he set her free. I want you to know, students, whether you're in middle school or you're in high school and you're sitting in your room and you're watching this right now, that Jesus wants to do the same for you and I. Jesus wants to forgive our sins, all the mistakes we've made, all the bad situations we find ourselves in right now, and all the choices we'll make in the future that leads us into sin. Jesus wants us to live the kind of life that is free from pain, free from guilt, free from shame, free from depression, free from sickness, free from hurts, free from bad choices, free from regrets, and free to live the kind of life that brings joy and peace and goodness and faithfulness and kindness and so on. Jesus wants that for you. I want that for you. And I know your leaders want that for you. I want you to look at me in the eyes right now because I don't want you to miss this as I end. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not your bad choices. And you are not your regrets. You're not your failures. You are loved, and because you are loved, you are forgiven. And because you are forgiven, you are freed. Do you believe that tonight? Because I want you to know I do for you, and I hope you will as well. And can I ask you a favor? Don't leave tonight if you need to let go of something in your past. Please find a leader and have that conversation with them. They'll be more than willing to help you walk through what it would look like for you to be free from your past.